All right, let's talk about the most misunderstood and honestly, the most critical phase of any project, commissioning. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain and uncover the real critical path to handover. The one that hides in plain sight and turns what looks like an on-time project into a late one. Let's get right into it. So I want to start with a very direct question for you. Is your schedule lying about its own finish date? Come on, if you've ever managed a project that got stuck at 99% complete for weeks or even months, you already know the answer is probably yes. And the problem isn't your team on the ground. It's that the schedule itself is failing to model reality. And that really brings us to the heart of the matter, understanding where the real finish line is. See, most of the painful delays that happen at the end of a project, they all come from this fundamental misunderstanding of what project completion actually means. Look at this slide. This leaves out a truth that so many people miss. A project doesn't end when the last piece of equipment is installed. That's just step one. The real journey to handover is this tough sequence of testing, authority inspections, getting those final approvals, and then handover. This sequence is, without a doubt, the most poorly planned part of most schedules out there. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say there is one single activity that is the most dangerous thing you can have in your entire schedule. It's so common, you see it everywhere, but it single-handedly hides massive risks and pretty much guarantees delays if you don't handle it the right way. And here it is, the villain in plain sight. It's that single, innocent-looking line item called testing and commissioning. The second you see this in a schedule, you should know that schedule is broken. It completely hides all those critical steps we just talked about, the specific tests, the inspections, the very real possibility of reinspection, and all the approvals. Trying to report progress on this one activity, it's completely meaningless. Okay, so enough about the problem. How do we actually fix this? We have to move from this broken model to a real solution. It's time to completely deconstruct commissioning and build a plan that has the same level of detail and respect we give to the construction phase itself. Now, this is the right way to do it. Just look at this work breakdown structure. Commissioning isn't one big task. It's a series of totally distinct phases. You've got pre-commissioning, testing, the official authority inspection, final approval, and then system handover. Each one of these has its own requirements, its own teams, and, this is critical, its own risk profile. Let's start with pre-commissioning. This isn't just some optional prep work, okay? These are mandatory activities that have to happen after installation is done. We're talking about things like flushing and cleaning pipes, pressure testing systems, and running continuity and IR tests on electrical gear. Trying to skip these to rush to an authority inspection is probably the number one reason why inspections fail. And here's the other crucial point. You absolutely cannot lump everything together. The wrong way is having one generic MEP testing bucket. The right way, the professional way, is to create separate, specific activities for each discipline. The rules for passing an HVAC test are totally different from a firefighting system test, which, by the way, often has zero tolerance for failure. All right, let's keep building on this. Now we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty, the non-negotiable details that separate a truly professional schedule from what's basically just an optimistic guess. This is all about modeling reality, not just hoping for the best. Take a really close look at the details for this authority inspection activity. There are two things here that are absolutely critical. First, notice the activity type is task-dependent. Why? Because an inspection is actual work. It's not some instantaneous event. And second, the duration is greater than 0. Inspections take time, they use up people's resources, and you have to plan for that. I really want you to burn this rule into your memory. Authority inspections are activities, never, ever milestones. A milestone has 0 duration. It just marks a point in time. An inspection is work. Treating it like a milestone is one of the most common and damaging mistakes you can make in project planning, period. So what happens if an inspection fails? Well, a professional schedule actually accounts for this. You need to build in the logic for what we call a re-inspection loop. That means you have the initial inspection, then you have an activity for potential rectification works, and then another activity for the re-inspection itself. This logic protects you from claims and shows you have a realistic grasp of how the acceptance process actually works. And here's another non-negotiable for you. You cannot perform real commissioning on temporary utilities. You just can't. Permanent power and permanent water must be linked as hard finish-to-start predecessors to their commissioning activities. If that logic is missing from your schedule, your completion date is basically a work of fiction. All right, now for the payoff. When you take the time to build your schedule with this level of detail, with this kind of logic, something really amazing happens. The true critical path, the one that is actually dictating your project's finish date, it finally becomes visible. And the key to finding it is this number right here, 0. This is the total float value you are looking for. Remember, total float is how long an activity can slip before it pushes out the entire project. When your commissioning logic is correctly driving the project to the finish line, its float has to be 0. And here's the proof, right here in P6. In a correctly built schedule, you're going to see your key commissioning and handover activities sitting right on that critical path, with a big fat 0 in the total float column. If you go look at your schedule right now and the commissioning section has weeks of floats, I can almost guarantee you your schedule's logic is fundamentally broken. But the ultimate benefit of doing all this? It's clarity and accountability. When you compare your updated schedule against the baseline, this logic clearly shows the real source of delays. It becomes impossible to ignore that it's the commissioning slippage that's pushing out the end date. This protects the contractor from unfair blame and gets the entire project team focused on what actually matters. So to wrap this all up, let's run through a final readiness checklist. I want you to think of this as the professional's code, the essential checks to make sure your schedule is actually built to deliver a project on time. So let's run through this together. Ask yourself these questions about your schedule. 1. Is your commissioning WBS properly broken down? 2. Is your testing separated out by discipline? 3. Are your authority inspections actual activities, not milestones? 4. Are permanent utilities linked as real predecessors? 5. Have you even considered adding logic for re-inspections? 6. Is commissioning sitting on the critical path with 0 float? And finally, 7. Are your handover milestones defined by system instead of just one big project complete sign-off? If you can tick every single one of these boxes, congratulations, your schedule is built for success. And that leaves us with the final and most important thought. Building the schedule correctly is just step 1. Now that you can actually see the real critical path to completion, the big question is, how are you going to manage it?